Welcome back as we start our next unit, unit number 5. Now, before I explain this unit, I want everybody to repeat after me. I will conquer fractions. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our next unit, unit 5, is called rational expressions. Now, rational expressions are also known as algebraic fractions. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we are going to conquer our fractions in this unit. All right, so for today, we are going to start with day 1, and our goal, given an algebraic fraction, you will be able to factor and reduce. So we're going to take this one day at a time. Today, we're just going to factor and reduce. So factor, that was the title of our last unit. So let's go ahead and take a look. So when we want to reduce our algebraic expressions, here are your steps. Number 1, factor first. First and foremost, you always have to factor first. Factor the numerator and the denominator. Cancel any binomial that is exactly the same in the numerator and the denominator, and then reduce any monomials in the numerator and denominator. And we have this special case. So when we cancel, remember, we need to be exactly the same on top and bottom. Now, if you have x minus 5 on the top and 5 minus x on the bottom, they're not exactly the same, but they're close. These are actually going to cancel to give you -1. So what I want to do is show you that special case. So here, what I did for the special case is I went ahead and I tried an example. So let's take a look. 5 minus 3, and then in the bottom I switched it and did 3 minus 5. Let's see what happens. 5 minus 3, we're going to get 2. And 3 minus 5, well, here we're going to get -2. And what happens when you have a positive over a negative? These are going to cancel to -1. So that means whenever your numerator and denominator are the same things, but it's subtraction and it's backwards, you will be able to cancel these, but you're going to cancel to get -1. And this is only with subtraction, because when you have addition, 5 plus 3 is 8, and 3 plus 5 is 8. They cancel and you get a +1. So here, it really doesn't matter which order for addition. All right, so let's go ahead now and let's practice. So here, reduce each fraction to lowest term. So step number 1, factor first. So look at the numerator, the top. Can we factor that? Nope, it's a simple monomial. Let's look at the denominator. Can we factor that? Nope, it's a simple monomial, so we can't factor it. So now we have to take a look and see, well, can we just reduce it? So can I find a number that goes into 20 and 25? I think they can both be divided by 5. So if I divide the top by 5, we're going to get 4. Divide the bottom by 5, and we get 5. Another way to do that is 20 divided by 25. Hit math, fraction, which is 1, and then enter, and there we go. It is 4/5. And then just like we've been practicing all school year, we have x to the 5 over x to the 3. So when you have variables, when you divide, you subtract the powers. So we get x squared in the numerator. And you have just reduced your first fraction. Okay, now let's take a look at B. All right, so here we have a trinomial and a binomial. Now, you cannot simply cancel parts, because a trinomial is a quantity, and a quantity is held together with your addition and your subtraction symbols. So we can only cancel if everything on the top is the same as everything in the bottom, and we're not the same. So we're going to come up here in step number 1, factor first. So let's see, can we factor the numerator? Well, it's going to be trinomial factoring. So I'm going to set up my 2 parentheses. Now, what times what is going to give you x squared? Well, that's going to be x and x. Now we have to think of 2 numbers that multiply to -3 and add to -2. Well, that's going to be -3 and +1. Okay, so now I've just factored the numerator. Now let's factor the denominator. So when I factor the denominator, let's see, well, it looks like there is a GCF. My GCF is x. And then parentheses, x minus 3. Now, if I take a look, is anything exactly the same in the top as it is on the bottom? Well, I have parentheses, x minus 3, parentheses, x minus 3, so I can cancel those. Okay, and then my final answer, I'm left with an x plus 1 all over x. And I cannot cancel the x's because this x has a positive 1 next to it. So that is our final answer. Okay, so let's go down now and try C. So the first thing we have to do is factor first. So when we factor, remember the first type of factoring you always try is GCF. And then we try difference of perfect squares. Then we try trinomial. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to try grouping. So let's take a look at our first one. Well, it's a binomial, and there is a GCF. The GCF is 2. So I factor out a 2, and we get x minus 9. Now if I look at the denominator, my GCF here is going to be 3. And then I'm going to get a 9 minus x. Now, is anything exactly the same in the numerator as it is in the denominator? Nothing is exactly the same, but if I look, x minus 9, 9 minus x, those are just the opposites. So these will cancel, but I will get a negative 1 in the top. So then what is 2 times negative 1? Well, that's negative 2 all over 3. And that's our final answer. All right, let's try another one. Let's go over now to D. So the first thing we have to do is factor first. So if I look at my numerator, 4 minus x squared, there's no GCF. So next I'm going to try difference of perfect squares, and they're both perfect squares. So one's a plus, one's a minus. The square root of 4 is 2 and 2. The square root of x squared is x and x. Now, if I look at the denominator, there is a GCF of 3. So I factor out a 3, and then we get x minus 2. Now, let's look carefully. Is anything exactly the same as the numerator as it is in the denominator? Nope, but if I take a look, 2 minus x, x minus 2, those are almost the same, but they're backwards, so these will cancel and I will get negative 1. My final answer then is going to be negative 1 parentheses 2 plus x all over 3. And you've done it. All right, let's go ahead and try now letter D. All right, the first thing we have to do is factor first. So let's go ahead and factor out the numerator. So if I look here, there's a GCF. My GCF is 3x. So 3x parentheses, and I'm going to be left with x minus 3. Let's go ahead then and factor the denominator. So this is a trinomial. So I get 2 sets of parentheses, x, x. Now I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to negative 21 and add to positive 4. Okay, and that's going to be plus 7 minus 3. Now look carefully. Is anything exactly the same in the numerator as it is in the denominator? Yes, it is, so we can cancel that out. And those are exactly the same, so they cancel to a positive. So our final answer here is 3x all over x plus 7. Okay. Last but not least, letter E. The first thing we have to do is factor first. Can I factor the numerator? Nope, there's no pluses or minuses. It is just a monomial, so I keep that as 6m. Now if I look at the denominator, can we factor this? Yes, they both have an m in common. So my GCF is m, and then we're going to have an m plus 5. Now we have to check to see, is anything exactly the same in the top as it is in the bottom? Well, I have a monomial of m, and I have an m on the outside here. So since those are all alone, they can cancel. Okay, and my final answer here is 6 over m plus 5. And you have got your final answer. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, these are your steps for reducing your algebraic fractions. Okay, next, I do want to show you one little side note, so let's flip over. And this is talking about the undefined term. So here's my question. Can this be true? 12 divided by 0. Why or why not? So let's take a look. 12 divided by 0. Okay, we're getting an error. Error. Divide by 0. Can you divide by 0? No, you can't divide something into 0 parts. So you can never divide by 0. Why or why not? Because you get an error. You cannot divide by 0. So can we ever have a 0 in the bottom of a fraction? No. So a fraction is called undefined, and this is your vocabulary word for today, undefined. A fraction is undefined when the denominator is equal to 0. To find the undefined values, set the denominator equal to 0. So state the values that make each fraction undefined. Well, undefined, look under the fraction, and we're going to set this equal to 0. So x equals 0 is the undefined term. So to find the undefined term here, we're going to take the denominator, we're going to set it equal to 0. And now we're going to solve for x. So I have to add 4. So x equals 4 is the undefined value. Undefined term. Because if I put a positive 4 in there, what's 4 minus 4? It's 0, and you cannot have a 0 in the denominator. Okay, so now let's take a look at number 3. To find the undefined term, you take the bottom, we set it equal to 0. Okay, and then we solve for x. So we subtract 3. And then 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Okay, and then x is equal to negative 1.5. So if I take a negative 1.5 and I plug it in here, we get negative 3 plus 3, which would make this 0, so that's your undefined value. Okay, so everybody go ahead, find your undefined value for number 4, plug it in the computer, and you'll be done for today. All right, let's see, were you able to get x equals 4? All right, everybody, have a great night tonight.